Welcome, r/SupernovaRevenge. He would have made a wonderful meat pie. This goes back to 1986, when I was trying to save enough money to get back to college. I worked at a bar 6 nights a week, and was making pretty good money, but in order to save that money for college I needed a cheap place to live. Fortunately, a couple of friends of mine, Bob and Steve, were spending the last 2 years of college living off campus, and needed a roommate for the third bedroom. It came out to about $200 a month with utilities, so I was in. I moved in that August and set myself up in cheap furniture and acre from the local thrift shop. My roommates and I set up some ground rules. Since I was getting home between 4 and 5 in the morning, bringing home a party wasn't going to be an option, and since I was going to be sleeping until 3 in the afternoon, the volume would have to be kept to a low roar. But things went great for us for the first 6 or 7 months that we lived together. Bob was a diligent student who demanded quiet time for studying, and Steve was on the track team and a sports reporter for the local newspaper, and had little time for partying. The weekends got a little rowdy sometimes, but the cops never got a noise complaint, and our house guests never hit a parked car when they left our house at 5 o'clock Sunday morning, so it was no big deal. That's when the snake came into the Garden of Eden. His name was Franklin. It upset him terribly if you called him Frank, so I only did it when he really pissed me off. He was expelled from college and didn't want to go home and face the wrath of his parents, so he asked if he could crash on our couch for a couple of weeks until he got a job and his own place. I was opposed because I would be waking him up every night when I came home, and I didn't like him. Steve didn't care. He thought that Franklin was a pain in the ass, but felt sorry for the guy, so he was neutral on the whole subject. Bob was the deciding vote, and he said yes. Franklin moved in on a Wednesday in February, and on Thursday afternoon, when I came downstairs for breakfast, he had brought in his Triumph motorcycle and taken it apart in the dining room. The frame was leaning against the wall, the engine and exhaust system were strewn all over the floor, dripping oil on the carpet. I was not quite awake, having not had my coffee, and I politely asked him, "What the fuck is this, Frank?" He replied, "I have to repair it before I get a job. If it's not fixed, then I can't get to work." I shook my head and went for coffee, hoping that Bob could get the security deposit out of Franklin before we kicked him out. A few days later, when I came home from work, Franklin had a large group of friends in the apartment, listening to Led Zeppelin on the stereo at too loud a volume for anyone to get sleep in the house, and drinking my Jack Daniels. I went and grabbed the nearly empty bottle and turned to Franklin. "Frank, what gives you the right to drink this?" I was pissed. "It's in the kitchen. It's communal property, like the soup and the cereal." He looked smug, like he had argued before the Supreme Court and won. "The food and the booze are mine, idiot. I pay for it, I consume it. If you want any of it, then you pay me for it, or you buy it for yourself." Again, I was furious. The bottle of Jack was nearly $20, and I had just bought it on Tuesday. It was nearly gone, and was supposed to have gotten me through the week. Franklin shrugged as if it were not his concern, and went back to entertaining his friends. The next day I put a padlock on my cabinet. It was only after Bob told him he had to pay rent or move out that he finally went and got a job, and he did that by using my name as a reference at bars that I had relationships with, and no desire to hire Franklin as a favor to me. Incidents went on like this for the next few weeks. Some were minor, some were repeats of what he had done before. For example, he invited one of the neighbor's daughters into the apartment for a drink, and then proceeded to get her drunk and play strip poker. The girl was only 16, and the father was a member of the National Guard. He would have shot all of us if he had found out what was going on. Franklin had an affinity for firearms, and began to sleep with his .38 special under his pillow on the couch, which allowed him to suddenly wake up with a handgun pointed at whatever startled him. The final straw for me came almost 3 months to the day after he moved in. Bob was slowly noticing that the money that was coming out of the house fund, the money used to pay the utilities, the rent and miscellaneous bills, was coming up short. I was concerned that we had a house guest that was helping themselves to our cash, and Bob thought it was something else. When Franklin left for a work meeting, we went to his room and searched it, finding a cigar box with several $100s in it, including bills that Bob had marked. Bob had to go back on campus for an advisors meeting and told me not to confront Franklin until he got back, then left for his appointment. Franklin arrived home about 15 minutes after Bob left. My plan was to wait for Bob. I just wanted to play it cool and not do anything stupid. Franklin decided to push my buttons, telling me that his employer was going to give him a raise for doing such an outstanding job as a member of the security team. I listened to him brag until I couldn't stand it anymore. I casually asked, "Does this mean you'll repay the money you've been stealing from the house, Frank?" He lost all the color to his face and then rushed me from where I sat on the couch. I worked at a bar as a disc jockey that backed up security. I knew a few tricks, and I was a big guy with some decent upper body strength. I was on my feet by the time Franklin got to me, and his plan to hit me in the face was spoiled by me getting on my feet. He swung and was immediately off balance, which I took advantage of by hitting him on the side of his neck below the ear and dropping him to the floor. I was angry. No, I was full of rage. My time at the bar had turned me into an alcohol-dependent madman, and I occasionally lost control of my emotions when I dealt with people who offended me. Franklin had offended me, and I was going to put an end to it. I kicked him a couple of times in the ribs, then grabbed him by the hair and broke his nose. I grabbed him by the ankles and dragged him to the kitchen in front of the stove. I opened the door to the oven, turned the oven on to its highest setting, and then shoved Franklin headfirst into the oven with the intention of gassing him to death. There was only one problem. It was an electric stove. It was the realization that the stove was electric that broke the spell. I hit him a couple of times in the face, realized my heart wasn't in it anymore, and let him go. He went down to his room. I went to my cabinet, got out my jack, and had a drink or two. Bob never questioned me about my assault on Franklin, and Franklin never mentioned it either. The house money was paid back, the bills were caught up, and all was well again. Franklin moved into a house with a couple of friends about a month after I tried to gas him. I never saw him again except in passing. 30 years later, he friended me on Facebook, and the first thing he mentioned was how funny it seems now that I tried to kill him. He's changed a lot, and so have I, and we chat, so I guess that what they say is true. Tragedy plus time equals comedy. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you would like to see more, feel free to subscribe.